In the fourth and final part of this lecture, I will reflect on the use of qualitative methods in the context evaluation and try to draw a few conclusions. You've probably identified by now a number of problems with evaluation approaches. I'd like to discuss a few of these briefly. Firstly, evaluation often involves a wide range of stakeholders: health service users, health service providers, managers and policymakers. And all of these groups have an interest in the conduct and findings of the evaluation. Research aims and methods may need to be negotiated with these groups, many of whom may act as gatekeepers to the research sites. But these groups may have little knowledge of research methodology and may indeed disagree with themselves regarding both the research question and how that question should be addressed in terms of methods. Another key issue is defining what should be evaluated. Researchers may disagree among themselves on this and may disagree with the key stakeholders. Some interventions are intrinsically difficult to define or disentangle for the purposes of evaluation. In other words, they're part of a much bigger sort of integrated health system and cannot be easily teased out. In addition, stakeholders may disagree on the interpretation of findings or may reject the findings of research. Not uncommonly, evaluations are commissioned to support particular decisions that may indeed have already been taken. And there are many examples from a wide range of settings of programs being rolled out on a large scale despite somewhat disappointing evaluation results from studies commissioned by the health services or by other large implementers such as bilateral agencies or NGOs. The issue of what evaluation results mean may therefore be quite contested across different stakeholder groups. And consequently, evaluation can be a highly politicized activity. A number of other issues may also be problematic. For example, the program and the context in which it is located may be evolving. It is rare that we are able, within health services research, to fully control or contain our research environment. Health services are changing all the time, new policies and programs are being implemented, healthcare providers are coming and going from healthcare facilities, and the range of patients may change over time. This makes interventions in the social world much more difficult, both to control and contain, but also to evaluate and understand. In evaluations, researchers may be expected to engage more closely in making recommendations for policy and practice, and some researchers feel uncomfortable about this. They don't like the idea of researchers being asked to take results and place these within a policy context. And finally, evaluations may often be limited by pragmatic factors, such as time and funding constraints. We may need to strike a balance between what is optimal, what we'd like to do under ideal conditions, and what we can do with the time and funding that's available for the particular evaluation. There are some further problems that are specific to qualitative methods in evaluation. Not surprisingly, the first problem or issue concerns causality. To what extent can the effects identified in a qualitative study be attributed to the program change or intervention? To what extent can qualitative methods help us to see or identify a pathway that will allow us to draw the conclusion that a particular program change or intervention led to a particular set of effects or changes? Many people contest the ability of qualitative research to robustly determine causality because of the fact that many of these research designs do not include a control group, and so we can't be sure that these changes might not have happened anyway, regardless of the intervention. A second problem is that qualitative researchers are often faced with the difficult task of explaining and justifying qualitative methods to those who are not familiar with them, which might include health services managers, the public, or health services providers. It's often quite difficult to justify and explain how qualitative methods may help us to better understand a program change or new policy. Third, one of the main critiques of qualitative evaluations from the positivist paradigm regards generalizability. To what extent are these findings, often drawn from quite small numbers of research participants or settings, applicable in other contexts? And indeed, how do we understand the concept of generalizability within qualitative research domain? In some of the latter lectures in this course, you'll be exploring this concept of generalizability and how it differs in qualitative research from in more quantitative research or the positivist paradigm. In summary, in qualitative research, one is often more concerned about conceptual or theoretical generalizability rather than statistical generalizability. How one assesses conceptual or theoretical generalizability will be discussed in more detail later in the course. Another issue with qualitative methods are costs. The time and resources required to implement these kinds of studies, which may often be quite large given the need to interview people in their setting and to explore the views of a wide range of stakeholders. And of course, all the other general limitations of qualitative approaches that you'll be discussing in the module may well apply. Before I finish the lecture, I'd like to make a few concluding points. Firstly, and perhaps most importantly, that qualitative methods, the use of qualitative methods in evaluation is not fundamentally different from using these methods for other purposes. Qualitative methods in the context of evaluation can be useful in addressing or answering a number of key questions, such as how do participants perceive the program or change? How is the intervention delivered in the field? How does the intervention work? And how can the measured changes be explained? In the lecture, I've tried to illustrate with a number of examples these different ways in which qualitative methods can be used. Unfortunately, much qualitative evaluation research that you might read in the literature is quite descriptive rather than analytic, and this restricts its use in understanding mechanisms of change or building theory. We need more qualitative research that explores in depth mechanism of change and attempts to use data to help us build models or theories about how interventions or programs work or don't work in particular settings or for particular groups. In contrast to other qualitative studies, those studies undertaken in the context of evaluation often have a specific emphasis on identifying a specific problem. They're often situated within larger evaluations, which may involve a range of other methods, and which therefore increase the complexity of the whole research process. Qualitative methods within the context of evaluation therefore perhaps differ in these ways from qualitative approaches that are used for other purposes. The focus on a specific problem and the location of these qualitative studies within larger evaluations make undertaking these pieces of research more challenging and require planning and thought as to how these different methods and ideas are to be combined. As always, using qualitative methods appropriately within the context of evaluation is crucial, and this brings us back to the point raised right at the start of the lecture, that the first step for any piece of research is to identify the question and the objectives related to that question, and then to identify appropriate methods to address that question. Qualitative methods may not be the most appropriate method for all research questions. I hope that this lecture has provided you with a brief introduction into the different ways in which qualitative methods can be used alongside healthcare evaluation more broadly, and has illustrated some of the strengths and weaknesses of qualitative methods in evaluation. As you go on in the course, you may want to consider, when looking at different examples, what we can understand about the strengths and weaknesses of qualitative methods in the context of evaluation, and to think about the different methods that have been used and how you might apply those methods within your own context. Thank you.